And now, here to entertain you all, because every day he's hustling. Side Hustle Cinema.
Welcome back to the channel, Side Hustle Cinema here. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to be doing a 4K disc review on the Karate Kid box set. I'm going to be doing all three movies. We'll take a look at the packaging. We'll talk about the video, the audio, the special features. And I'm going to try to keep my opinions on the movie to a minimum because I'm doing all three movies. So for the length of the video, I'm going to try to keep my opinions on the movie kind of short. But I'll throw in a few things here and there. Anyway, we got a lot to cover, so let's go talk about it. Well, starting first, I want to just take a look at the packaging. I did an unboxing of this on another video when I first got this in the mail. So I'll just quickly give you a little brief overview of what this thing is included, just in case you missed that video. This is the front of the box, and it comes in a nice slip box. This is a nice hard slip box. You get all three movies with the individual slip covers on them. There's the front image. There's the side. And there's the back. I really like the back there. It's got a whole bunch of characters from all the different movies. Nothing on the front. Nothing really on the bottom. There's the movies in there. We'll pull those out real quick. Like I said, really nice slip box. Nice hard cover. Each of the movies come with their own slip covers, and the cases are all good sturdy cases, no eco cases on this set. There's the back of the first one. The disc underneath of all of them is the same as the slip covers, and you do get disc art on these. There's part 2. And there's the back. And there's part 3. And there's the back to that one. All three movies were directed by the same director, John Avildsen, who also directed Rocky, who he won an Oscar for that movie. Rocky 5, Neighbors, Lean on Me. So he had a lot of good movies. This was my first time watching Karate Kid since Cobra Kai came out. I was kind of curious to see if it would kind of change the way I felt when I watched the movie. I could say it didn't really change anything, even though I root on Johnny now in Cobra Kai, still when I watch Karate Kid, you go right back to rooting for Daniel. At least I did. But I was curious to see what that would be like. First time watching it since, Cobra Kai came out. The first Karate Kid movie has had a previous 4K release. But this one is different than that first one. This one has Dolby Vision. The first one did not. It had just standard HDR10 and did not have the upgraded HDR. Now, I personally don't have the first one on 4K, so I couldn't really compare it to the 4K, the older 4K of it. So I was pretty much stuck comparing it to the Blu-ray that comes with the set. I compared all three to the Blu-rays that come in the collection. I think these Blu-rays are not new. I think these are older Blu-rays, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that, because they looked okay. They looked not too bad. But I'll show you what I saw. Of course, I did some side-by-side comparison shots of all three films. I think I'm going to kind of talk about the audio of all three films, sort of in a whole collection. One, to save time, because honestly, they were all kind of, my opinions on them are going to be similar on all three. But let's first talk about the video on part 1. There is quite a bit of grain in this movie. It really depends on how much grain bothers you, how much you'll be bothered by this. I'm not a big fan of grain at all. I guess I'm a grain hater. And at times I thought the grain was a little heavy, a little too much grain at times. The 4K definitely seemed darker and in a lot of spots than the Blu-ray did, but there was good shadow detail. I thought the black levels looked pretty good, and I thought, you know, there was nice pops of color. You know, I thought a lot of the colors and things kind of stood out, you know, on the old cars. Here's an example of like the motel sign. You know, I think there's more detail in the mountain. I think the sign pops a little bit more on that 4K side. But here in this scene with the motorcycles, I think it's a little bit darker. You know, I wouldn't mind it actually being a little lighter like on the Blu-ray side. But I think both, you know, look pretty good in that shot. In this shot with Mr. Miyagi coming out of his, you know, workshop, you can see a lot more detail, like even in the door. Like the door looks like dirtier, and you can see a lot more detail in his skin and some shadow details on the face. On the Blu-ray side, it actually kind of looks blurry. Part of that might have been, you know, the shot I took. I don't think it was actually that blurry, but it's definitely missing some detail there. But then in this shot where they're going, you know, getting ready to sign up for the tournament, the 4K side just looks a little darker. I guess there's a touch more detail. But this is one of those shots where, you know, I sort of like the Blu-ray side of this one a little bit better, because some of the shots on the 4K were just too dark. I wish it could have kept the detail of the 4K without it being as dark as it is, and could have been a little lighter like it is on the Blu-ray. And this shot from the tournament, honestly, there's not a ton of difference. I mean, you can see a little bit of difference in the color of the referee's t-shirt. The shade of green or gray on the back wall there, like where the lights are. And then the color of the mat. And that's really the only difference you really can make out too much in that shot. You know, it's a bit panned back though. You know, in far away shots, you didn't really notice too much difference. The close-up shots, a little more detail, but it is a little darker. I did watch a couple reviews of people reviewing the old 4K edition of Karate Kid. And, you know, they complained a lot about the skin tones being red, and it looks like they had cleared up all of that. I didn't see that at all in this. So other than, you know, being a little heavy on the grain, I thought they both looked good, but I think the 4K did look a little better, but it didn't beat it by much. All three of these movies featured Dolby Atmos, and all three of these discs kind of had the, you know, I pretty much would review all three kind of the same. And that is that although they all sounded pretty good, there wasn't a ton of things going on in the movie. I don't think it was necessarily a fault of the mix, though. It's just kind of what the movies are. You know, despite being called Karate Kid, there's actually not a ton of action that goes on in these movies. I mean, there's little scenes here and there that are pretty quick, you know, like where Daniel's running from, you know, Johnny and all the guys from the Halloween dance, or, you know, where he's constantly getting jumped by the bad guys in all these movies. There's a little bit of action here and there, but not a ton, and it never lasts very long. I thought the dialogue was, you know, it was nice. It was clean and clear coming from the front. There was a little bit of bass here and there. Again, it's not one of those types of movies. The soundtrack and the score of all three movies, you know, sounded pretty good. As far as the Atmos tracks go, Part 2 was by far the winner. There was a lot more action in that one. As far as the Atmos channels go, like when they go to the airstrip, when they're looking for Okinawa, or their little village in Okinawa, and when they go to that airstrip, you know, there's lots of construction going on. There's airplanes flying around. So there was some cool stuff going on there. And then during the storm scene, you know, the big storm scene where, you know, Daniel goes out and rescues the little girl and they save Sato. That was also a really nice scene with lots of things going on. The rain, the thunder. there was some good use of the height speakers in that scene as well. So now let's move on to the video for part 2. So part 2 came out in 1986, just 2 years after the original, and this one by far is the best looking of the 3. They cleaned up the grain a whole lot more in this one. There was some grain to be seen, but it's very light, it's very fine, and really it's a great picture. I mean, it's a really, really nice picture. And you can see it in the comparison shots I have that, you know, it looks way better than the Blu-ray. You know, part 1, it was kind of hit or miss. You know, it was a little dark, but there was more detail. This one here is kind of perfect in a way, as you can just see in some of these. This first one, this is just Chosen's arm when he's like shaking Daniel's hand. And you see that the 4K, like, it fixed that problem of being dark. It's a little bit lighter. You see a little more detail, a little more texture, and it just looks a lot better. And this isn't even like the best screenshot. There's some in here that are just way better. This one here, when Mr. Miyagi, you know, is sitting on the beach and Daniel's trying to comfort him, you know, you can see the tears in his eyes, that watery, the glassiness. The skin tones look way better on the 4K side with both Miyagi and Daniel. You know, Daniel's shirt looks, you know, the color on his shirt looks better. I mean, it's just overall like a much, much better picture. The Blu-ray side looks a little faded, a little washed out in comparison. And really that 4K picture looks fantastic. Here's another scene where they're getting ready to, you know, break the ice, the 6 pieces, you know, making that wager in the bar. And again, I think the 4K looks better. You see a little more detail, even though this is like a pulled back pitch, you know, a pulled back shot. Both look pretty good, but, you know, I'll take the 4K on this one as well. And just look at this shot here, you know, when, what's her name, Miku or something? I think it was Miku. She's dancing, you know, at the bone ceremony at the end of the movie. Just look at the colors on that fan, you know, her skin tones. I mean, it looks really good on 4K. And this was the way the whole movie was. This isn't just one random scene that I picked out. I mean, the whole movie just looked fantastic. Really nice, almost reference quality. And you know, I haven't put together my top 10 list of the year just yet. This one might be a strong contender, though. It had the best Atmos track of any of them, and it definitely has the best picture of any of the 3. This was really good. And finally, the last scene that I have here, the last comparison shot. And again, just, you know, the 4K wins out. The skin tones, the colors on his gi there, it just looks a lot better. The Blu-ray side a little more washed out. So they did an excellent job on part 2. So let's move on to part 3 and let's talk about that one. Part 3 came out in 1989. Now part 3 is not a lot of people's favorites. And I think the biggest reason why, honestly, is because, you know, in part 1, he was just learning karate. And he got beat up a lot. But he got better. And in part 2, he didn't always get beat up. Like, he got attacked on the street and stuff by Chosen and his gang. But he actually fought back, you know, a decent bit. At least made a showing of himself. And then at the end of part 2, he actually fought, you know, for his life. I mean, the stakes went way high in part 2. Part 3, it was almost like they just went back to the beginning. I mean, he was getting, like, I mean, they jump him, like, all these guys, they, like, jump him, like 5 or 6 times during this movie. And every time he gets his butt kicked. Like, he doesn't do a thing. It's like he didn't know karate at all. And then, you know, I don't mean to spoil it, but in the end, I mean, he just absolutely gets dominated in the fight at the end. And, you know, it was just by, like, a fluky luck that he manages to score a point, you know, at the very end to win the whole thing. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's why people didn't like part 3, because they turned Daniel back into a giant wimp. and they had him just get dominated so hard in that movie. In this movie, I wonder though if people are going to start to appreciate 3 a little bit more though, because the new season of Cobra Kai is coming out in just a few weeks, at the end of December here. It's going to be featuring, these cast members returning from part 3. I think we're getting Terry Silver's character. We're getting Terry Silver's characters coming back in this next season of Cobra Kai, and I think we're getting Matt Barnes' character coming back as well. So I wonder if people are going to, kind of start to appreciate part 3 a little more. I think they'll definitely go back and probably watch it. So now let's go ahead and talk about the video of part 3. Well, this one, like the other 2, has Dolby Vision, but unlike the second one, the grain kind of came back a little bit heavier in this one. Not quite as heavy as part 1, but kind of heavy at times. It just didn't look as clean and clear as part 2 did. They did such an excellent job on part 2, and it was so disappointing to pop in part 3 and see it kind of go back to the level that they had part 1, that they used with part 1. I mean, if they could get it right so much on part 2, why couldn't they get it right on part 3? It is better than the Blu-ray, but not by a ton. I mean, you'll see in these comparison shots, like here's where Matt Barnes is, signing his deal to sort of torture Daniel, and he's got his cronies there with him. The skin texture's a little bit better on the 4K side. It's got a little better shadow detail to it. It's not better by a ton, and it's kind of, it's kind of just blah. In this next scene, Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are, they got one of their little trees, and they're trying to open up their bonsai shop. It actually looks pretty good on both sides, the 4K and the Blu-ray. I think there's a little more detail on the 4K side, a little more of those, shadow details creep into play as well. It does make it a little bit darker, but not by a lot. But the Blu-ray side looks pretty good as well. So not a huge upgrade. Looking at this bonsai tree growing out in the wild, I don't know actually which one I prefer. I almost kind of like the Blu-ray side a little bit more. You see a little more detail, I think, or a little more of the color, because the picture's just a tiny bit brighter. So this is one of those where I'm a little bit conflicted. In this scene where he's fighting Matt Barnes in the tournament, you can see on the 4K side it's a little crisper, it's a little more detail, a little bit better skin tone, I think. But again, it's fairly close. Part 3 for me kind of goes back to the level of part 1. I'll give a slight edge to the 4K, but not a ton. I think the grain's a little too heavy in both those movies. And if they could get it so right in part 2, why couldn't they get it right in parts 1 and 3 as much? Like, I would love to have seen, I guess it comes down to probably the source material, I suppose. But part 2 looked so good and was so much better than the Blu-ray. And parts 1 and 3, it was only slightly better than the Blu-ray. Part 3's Atmos track was just okay. I mean, there is a little more action in this one because they keep jumping Daniel like every 2 seconds. And as a movie, this is definitely my least favorite of the 3. So moving on to special features. If you're big on special features, you're going to be pretty disappointed in this set. There is not a lot of special features, and what is there mostly is ported over from the old Blu-rays. There's only a few special features that are on the 4K discs, and it's mostly things like deleted scene, trailer, and there is a new audio commentary on part 2. But other than that, there just isn't a whole lot in the way of special features on these 3 movies. So my overall score or grade, I guess, well, I don't really do scores and grades. Do I recommend it? I do. You're getting a really nice package. You're getting 3 4K discs that comes with Blu-ray discs. that all have their own slipcovers, that have Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, and I think they're all three the best that they've ever looked. They're all three the best that they've ever sounded. And you're getting that for $49.99. I think that's a good deal already. If you wait around, this set probably will come down in price a little bit. And if you wait a long time, I could even see this one being on sale for like $35 or even $29 at some point during the year. But I think $49.99 for this set is more than fair, especially if you're a fan of the movies. You know, I think that's kind of where we have the divide is, you know, if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, you probably picked this up already. But I wonder, you know, out loud, if you're only in your 20s and you don't have all that nostalgia for the Karate Kid series, do you even enjoy these movies? I'm thinking probably not. They're okay. You know, part 1 is I think the best story. Part 2 I think is really strong as well. Part 3 in my opinion takes a big step down, or really a step backwards. And I just wonder if like today's millennials who didn't grow up with the Karate Kid, I wonder if they would even care for these that much. Maybe Cobra Kai has brought some interest in these movies, but I'm not real sure. But I'm going to recommend picking it up. And I'm going to recommend go ahead and doing it sooner than later. You could wait for a sale, but I don't think there's any need to do that. Go ahead and pick them up. Give them a watch before the new season of Cobra Kai comes out. And yeah, it looks fabulous. So, you know, go ahead and pick this one up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. If you're unsubscribed to the channel, I invite you to subscribe. And leave a comment about anything that we talked about in this video. Are you planning on getting it? Have you already picked it up? You know, if you're younger, are you even a fan of the franchise? And that's going to do it for today's video. So until next time, stay safe, have fun, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you on the next one.